All right, I'm gonna get started. This session is being recorded, just so everybody knows, and I'll try to mention that a few times during this session. We're recording it largely so that anybody that couldn't make the session could log in and take a look at it at some point later. My name is Ginny Eckert. I'm the research director with Alaska Sea Grant, and this is the first time we're offering a webinar to provide information to people that are interested in submitting proposals to us. So we definitely welcome your feedback on this style of presentation, whether it's useful to you. There will be time at the end for questions. I'm going to run through a handful of slides to give you an overview of what Sea Grant is, what we're looking for, kind of go over information that's already in our call for proposals. If you haven't downloaded it already, there is a very detailed request for proposals available on our website. And if you have any questions about that at any time, you're welcome to email me. My email address is listed here. Okay, so I'm not hearing any complaints, so I'm assuming that everybody is good. So I'm going to move into the content for the presentation. Maybe I am. Okay. So Alaska Sea Grant is part of the National Sea Grant Program. We get our funding from NOAA, and the money that we get comes in 4-year increments. Of those 4-year increments, the research is allocated in 2-year increments. So each of the research projects, so we're right now looking for research projects that will start in February of 2020. And there is a very long lead time on when these projects will start, and that is largely because of the lengthy process that we follow. All the Sea Grant programs have to follow a set schedule dictated by the National Sea Grant Program. So each research project is 2 years, or up to 2 years. It could be 1 year, 1.5 years if you wanted, but it's up to 2 years. These tend to be pretty small projects, all told. The total project budget tends to be about $100,000. The reason for that is that we don't have a giant amount of money, but we do have a significant amount of money. So in this call, we have about $500,000 in project funding that's available. So if you do the math, that means we're looking to fund on the order of about 5 new projects. And in the past, during each of these 2-year cycles, we funded anywhere from 4 up to, I think, 8 projects 1 year when we had a variety of small projects. So we're definitely interested because of the small amount of money available to leverage funding. We're definitely interested in partnerships that can help leverage that funding. And we are, the other thing that I haven't mentioned here, but we'll get into in more detail, is that we also provide funding for a graduate student for 2 years. And that is not included in what we're calling project funding, okay? So that actually increases the amount of money available quite a bit, and is a significant player in increasing and funding graduate students for Alaska. So if somebody asked me what are the key features of an Alaska Sea Grant research project, the first thing that is essential is that it must address some emerging issue or problem in the state. We want to see some kind of benefit, and in National Sea Grant lingo, they're looking for something called impact. So we're looking for, functionally this means that we're looking for applied research, but there's a whole variety of different kinds of research, and I'll give you examples of our portfolio of what I funded in the past to give you an idea of the breadth and spread of what we funded in the past. The other issue, the other sort of common theme and sort of essential item to projects that are funded by Alaska Sea Grant is that we're looking for a significant engagement. Now, what that engagement is entirely up to you to decide how you want to derive that. But we are looking for, whatever the problem is, whoever's engaged in that problem, we want you engaged with them as well. And ultimately that's so that the project has ultimate impact. One thing that I will mention right now, and I'll mention again, is that National Sea Grant has indicated to us that they have some supplemental funding for aquaculture related projects. Because the government shut down, we don't have exact criteria that we know that we're following. However, because we know that there is the potential for additional aquaculture funding, in addition to this funding that I'm mentioning to you right now, we are particularly interested in encouraging proposals that have something to do with aquaculture. The research projects that will get funded also have to address our strategic plan. Now, our strategic plan is quite broad, and so this should not be a challenge, but your pre-proposal, and if you get invited to write a full proposal, should definitely address how specifically your project fits into the focus areas of our strategic plan. I will mention these focus areas are focus areas that are common to all Sea Grant programs, and our strategic plan, though, identifies specific areas within each of these focus areas that we're particularly interested in Alaska. So specifically mentioning the specific item, goal, or action that's going to happen with your project and tying it to the strategic plan is definitely an important key for success in being awarded an Alaska Sea Grant project. So these focus areas include healthy coastal ecosystems. This is much of the sort of basic science fits into this category. Sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. This is, of course, a very big focus area within the state of Alaska. And as I've just mentioned, because there's a potential for additional aquaculture funding, we're particularly interested in seeing aquaculture projects. Resilient communities and economies is another one of these focal areas, and environmental literacy and workforce development. The link to our strategic plan is here. It's available within the RFP. It's available on our website. So I definitely encourage you to take a good look at that and figure out how your project fits into the areas that Alaska Sea Grant is broadly interested in. And I should mention that by including a graduate student in your project, then you are already addressing a focus area that includes environmental literacy and workforce development, because training can fit into that category. Okay, so I'm going to run through sort of the mechanics of pre-proposal submission and the different elements that we are looking for within the pre-proposal itself. There's an online submission process, and there's a pre-proposal submission form where you can enter a lot of basic information. This is also where you'll give us general information about your project. And there, as I'll mention in the next slide, there's no budget needed, but we are interested in getting an idea of the scope of your project. It can be helpful to at least pencil out a budget so that you know what you're looking for. And we're also interested in what kind of graduate student that you're planning on engaging. So it'll ask you, is this a master's or a PhD student? And then would the student be in-state or out-of-state? What you indicate to us really doesn't factor into the selection process per se, but does give us a sense of sort of, we just want the scope of your project to match the scope of your budget and the kind of graduate student that you would engage with. The pre-proposal itself, you're going to submit to us as a PDF. It's going to include a 2-page project narrative, a 1-page statement of need and engagement plan, Admittedly, these are very brief and just an opportunity for you to give us an idea of the kinds of things that you're thinking of doing. If you've been funded by Alaska Sea Grant in the past, then we're looking for a description of the sort of progress that you've made and what you've done with those previous projects. So we're looking for 1 page per project on any Alaska Sea Grant funding that you've received in the past. We're also looking for CVs, curriculum vitae for each of the PIs and co-investigator, for each PI and co-investigator. And then we're also looking for a list of any individuals that you have a conflict of interest with. And this helps us to identify reviewers, both in the pre-proposal and the full proposal stage. Another thing that is part of the submission process is that we also ask you to suggest reviewers. And we ask you to suggest 10 reviewers. And if you think that's hard, you should try to have my job, because in the past, we've had to invite up to 25 people to find 3 reviewers for, and this is for full proposals. So if you get invites to review things, please accept them, because those of us that are running these reviews, and it happens in journals as well, we struggle to get people to even reply to our emails. If you're busy, just say no. Actually, that's a wonderful thing, to just give us a response at all. But because of that, we're shifting the burden onto the PIs, and you know your project better than we do, and so you are you are a great person to tell us who would be a good reviewer for your project. And just to mention again, these are going to be reviewers of a full proposal, should it be invited. And at the full proposal stage, all the reviewers must be from out of state. This is a requirement from National Sea Grant. This is something that we struggle with, because it's definitely hard for people out of state to understand Alaska. And so, someone that's familiar with your project, maybe not familiar with your project, but works on similar things in other areas, and so forth. If you have any questions, let me know. But we definitely appreciate that time and effort that you put into in terms of thinking about those reviewers. And of course, it goes without saying, those reviewers shouldn't be people that you put on your conflict of interest list as well. So here's the timeline. At Alaska Sea Grant, we have a mandatory pre-proposal stage. Only people that are invited to submit full proposals can submit full proposals. So we posted the RFP in December. Our pre-proposals are due February 15th. We will hold a pre-proposal panel in March, and then invite full proposals at that time. Then individuals will have about 2 months to prepare a full proposal. The full proposals are due May 17th. Over the summer, all of the full proposals are sent out to external peer reviewers. And then in addition, we hold a panel review where we bring in outside people. These are in addition to those peer reviewers. And so so you have the opportunity, your full proposal is reviewed by people who are very knowledgeable in your field, and then also by a broad group of people. So at every stage of this process, you should definitely plan on communicating, particularly in the pre-proposal process, which I'll mention in here in a minute, but definitely, communicate to a broad scientific audience, and not just to experts within your small subdiscipline. The pre-proposal panel is largely made up of our advisory committee, the Alaska Sea Grant Advisory Committee, and these are people from all walks of life, including commercial fishermen and local politicians. These are all people, though, that are very engaged and interested in what Alaska Sea Grant does. We also, where we need some technical expertise, we'll pull in people, additional people from outside, where we have proposals that are sort of outside the realm of expertise of, and then of the Alaska Sea Grant staff and some of the Marine Advisory Program faculty, in addition to the Alaska Sea Grant Advisory Committee. So at the end, we recommend projects to National Sea Grant. We then compile all the full proposals that have been submitted to us, and then we package that up, submit that to National Sea Grant, and then they provide the funding to us for these projects. So it's a lengthy process, and these are the steps that we are largely required to follow by the National Sea Grant Program. The different steps in review vary depending on whether it's the pre-proposal or the full proposal stage, and much of this text might be difficult for you to read, but this table is found in the call for proposals. I just want to highlight that 60% of the sort of review is going to be happening on the relevance of the project and the technical and scientific merit. We shift the focus of those two from the pre-proposal to the full proposal stage. And because we understand that in a couple of pages, you can't tell us all that much about the technical and scientific merit of your project. And so note that at the pre-proposal stage, we're weighting heavily the relevance of this project to Alaska Sea Grant. So here, we are looking how well does it fit our strategic plan? How well does it address some problem or challenge or emerging issue within Alaska? Are there students that are involved, or are there training opportunities, and are there good partnerships that are established here? Engagement, as I've mentioned, is a critical feature of Alaska Sea Grant, and so 15% of the evaluation will be placed on engagement, both at the pre-proposal and the full proposal plan. And then sort of basic to any research projects, we're also evaluating how qualified people are and how reasonable the budget is. In most cases, because these are small budgets, that probably the most common thing is that people maybe overcommit, but here's where it can be really helpful to say, well, I'm also going to leverage costs from other sources. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about existing projects that we have and encourage you a great way to think about, like, does my project fit into Alaska Sea Grant, is to go to our website. You can look at every project we've ever funded on our website, and you can take a look at the nature of the project, what are the questions they're addressing, and learn more about the projects themselves. So feel free to browse our website. This is not to say that if we've funded something in the past, that we're automatically going to fund it again, but it'll give you the sense of the kinds of things that we have addressed historically. I'm going to highlight a few projects because I think that's helpful to give you a sense of the kinds of projects that we viewed have been very successful in the past. But like I said, this does not imply a commitment for future funding of any of these projects. These are just sort of projects that have been very successful in the past. So this first project that I'll mention is called, they had a really savvy name here. They called it Stakes for Stakeholders. And the emerging issue that they were addressing here is coastal erosion. And the lack within the state of Alaska to have good maps of what our shoreline looks like in order to be able to detect changes over time with changes in weather and climate that are increasing erosion risk, particularly in some coastal communities where the community itself is right adjacent to that coastal area. So with this project, a variety of different people from a variety of different organizations came together and have established a series of stakes where they've planted literal stakes in the ground and then mounted external cameras so that a repeated photograph is made. Now, partners in communities are engaging and supporting and checking on these cameras over time, uploading data, distributing it to a generalized database. There's a graduate student that's involved in this project, and this project is, it also, and I should mention that this project has leveraged funding from a variety of other places as well. And so these are all really key features that we're looking for in our project. There's an emerging issue that's being addressed. There's great partnerships. There's a graduate student that's involved. Another project that historically was very successful was a project called the Graying of the Fleet. And here we see partnerships as well with the university and the Alaska Marine Conservation Council. This project actually received an award from National Sea Grant because it was called a Research to Application Award. Because with this project, they engaged with local communities. In this case, the community is a group of fishermen, to try to understand, and young people that are potential entrants to the fishery, to try to understand what are the barriers to entry in Alaska fisheries, and is the Alaskan fishing fleet aging, and what are issues that we might, what are ways we might address these issues. This group created a whole variety of public service announcements to put out on social media to encourage young people in Alaska to consider fishing as a career, and address some of the other hurdles that they identified. They put together a report that was passed on to policymakers, and a whole variety of different academic papers as well. So this project had a lot of impact in a variety of different arenas, which is really complementary. And once again, I will also say that this project had funding from the North Pacific Research Board as well. And so once again, we see lots of leveraging here where, our small amount of Alaska Sea Grant money is added to other money, and so the bigger project can be even more successful. And then I think this might be the last project that I'm going to mention. This project was looking at predation on hatchery salmon when they're first released into the marine environment. Anne Boudreau is a professor at the University of Alaska. She was working with some of the salmon hatcheries on this project. And I highlight this project because the salmon hatchery in Juneau actually provided the funding for the graduate student through a fellowship. And so we provided the project money, and they provided the student money. So once again, a really nice example of leveraging to get more done and do a cool project. Oh, that wasn't the last one. The last one I'm going to mention is a project that Heidi Pearson worked on with another graduate student. And here she was working closely with the whale watching industry. And this project had dual objectives. So they were working with participants in the whale watching industry themselves, so tourists. And they were identifying what did tourists learn by going on a whale watch tour. And then they also were looking at how the whales respond to a very quickly growing industry. And so they were tracking whales and looking at whales' behavior in and around tour boats. So once again, here we have an emerging issue. In this case, it's the growth of the whale watching industry, concern about how that industry might be impacting whales, but also sort of seeing the double edge of this project in that many people are learning a whole lot and gaining experience that they wouldn't in any other way have an opportunity to experience. Many of these tourists are, of course, from outside of Alaska and can gain an appreciation for nature and so forth in ways that they don't get to do in their regular life. Okay, so I wanted to leave time here, so we spent about half an hour going over sort of the general features. And so I wanted to open it up for questions. And so if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. If you're on the phone, if you're on, okay, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. Yeah, a couple quick questions, Ginny. How about NOAA collaborators? How does Sea Grant deal with that?
Yeah, so we encourage partnerships, and of course encourage partnerships with NOAA. Our funding comes from NOAA, and so they prohibit that we include any salary or any travel from those NOAA participants. But yes, we do like to include and participate with NOAA, so that's definitely a possibility. It just can't include travel or salary.
Okay, and then so would a NOAA collaborator be included as a co-PI or as a collaborator? Or is that distinction important to you?
I don't know that that distinction is critical from our point of view. I guess that would be something for you and your organization that you're running the proposal through may care about that. But yeah, I mean, if you list them as project partners, I don't know that sort of what you call them in our, matters that much to us.
Okay, that makes sense. And do you guys solicit letters of support in your proposals? I forget.
So not at the pre-proposal stage, but in the full proposal stage, we have an opportunity for you to indicate, we call them letters of collaboration, because we're not just looking for political support. I mean, we're looking for people that you're somehow going to engage with. So these could be agency partners that are going to participate, that your research may have outcomes that affect some management decision. That is the kind of thing that you could indicate through those letters. So the collaboration could be a very tight collaboration, or it could be somebody's going to use the results of your project kind of collaboration as well.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks for joining. Other questions?
Ginny, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, I know there's a difference between aquaculture and mariculture, and could you explain that? And does that play into this funding?
Tricky question. So within the state of Alaska, there are programs that are trying to increase opportunities for aquaculture within our state. Many of them have sort of tried to brand a new term called mariculture. And from our point of view, I don't know that it matters that you use that terminology or not. Within Alaska, of course, fish farming is not allowed, so we wouldn't anticipate that a project would have anything to do with fish farming. But our hatchery program, our salmon hatchery program, certainly could fit into the aquaculture footprint and framework. And we know from the National Sea Grant point of view, they define aquaculture very broadly. So I guess I wouldn't get hung up on definitions here. Aquaculture broadly defined is going to be supported through the National Sea Grant program.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Judy. I've got a question. We're working with a graduate student, a doctoral graduate student now, but by 2020, she would have attained her PhD. Do you have any, is it possible to include a postdoc as a graduate student, or is that beyond the scope here?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, postdocs. A postdoc would have to get funded out of your project budget, which is going to make it tricky, and because postdocs are expensive and the project budgets are not huge. our funding comes from National Sea Grant, and we have an allocation of money that is given to us for training graduate students specifically. And so we don't have that much flexibility with how we can use those traineeships. So the short answer is yes, you're welcome to include a postdoc. It needs to be in your project budget. And the same thing also applies to undergraduates, in fact. So we definitely encourage undergraduate participation, and that funding would need to come out of your project budget as well.
Okay.
So I see a question that's on the chat, and it says, I have a question about the requirement to include a graduate student. And I guess, let me clarify, it's not a requirement, but it's strongly encouraged. And our program officer would say, if there's not a graduate student involved, why is there not? Okay. So, you know, does every project have to have a graduate student, or would there be cases when undergraduate involvement would be sufficient? So you can make this case. Like I said, you know, if you know, undergraduate students are not as expensive as graduate students. And so if an undergraduate can help you to get that research done in a cost-effective manner, you can definitely make that case. I would definitely encourage you to include some kind of training opportunity, because that is a priority of the National Sea Grant program. And so I would say some kind of training opportunity is essential. And, you know, if you're not including a graduate student, then explain why. So we have funded projects in the past that haven't had graduate student involvement, and there's been a pretty good rationale for why. So it's definitely possible, but, you know, training graduate students is part of what the Sea Grant program does nationally. So we're looking to promote that and to include graduate students when possible. Other questions? So here's a question. This is a really good question. So is there an available pool of grad students we can explore to find a graduate student? Now, you don't need to identify the graduate student ahead of time. But what you might do is, if you're not embedded within the university, is find a university partner that can help you to connect to a graduate student. And if you need some help with that, reach out to me. I'd be happy, you know, shoot me an email, describe your project and say, here's the kind of project that we want to do. Who are the faculty that could help me to connect me with a graduate student? And we'll try to facilitate making that connection between you and the university people that can help connect you with a graduate student. It's probably reasonable that that faculty member would have some role. It doesn't have to be a huge role, but could have some role in that project as well. All right, so another question about students, lots of student questions. So this question is, do projects that include graduate students usually have them on board for a full 2 years? Or do they sometimes just come to Alaska for a summer to do the research? So we're really looking to build capacity within Alaska. And so we're really looking to fund graduate students within the state. So there is a dearth of graduate student funding out there. And so I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of that full 2 years of support. Now, it may be that you have a student that is, you know, 3 years into a PhD, has a, you know, another year of fellowship and only needs 1 more year of support. That would be entirely fine. Like if you're leveraging additional support, then yeah, you don't necessarily need to include a full 2 years of support for the graduate student for your project. But we would definitely encourage you to take advantage of and maximize the opportunity to engage with graduate students. Once again, if this is a piece that you're struggling with, reach out to me and I can try to help connect you and your project with the right people to make that a positive interaction. Other questions? Okay, not seeing other questions.
Jenny?
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. In the graying of the fleet project, did they have some kind of system where they would do placement of people, you know, on boats or whatever those students were looking for as far as a career path?
So that project was, you're welcome to look at our website. There's actually a link to a website that they have for that project. So if you want to learn more about that project, feel free to explore more. That project was largely a social science project that was trying to understand the barriers to entry. So that project involved interviews with fishermen and people and young people in coastal communities to try to understand those barriers. That project was not a workforce development project, but you know, there is the opportunity, you know, if you have an idea like that for workforce development, I guess I would encourage you to reach out to me or other staff at Alaska Sea Grant and let us talk to you some more about that. I mean, there have been some really interesting ideas, and you know, that once again, there you've got an emerging issue. You know, here's this problem, the graying of the fleet, and how can we systematically increase these opportunities? We'd probably be looking for something that isn't just funding, you know, a single internship, but, you know, is there an organization out there that wants to create a new program or something? So yeah, reach out to me or the Sea Grant director, Heather Brandon, might be another good person to talk to about workforce development, because we also have funding within Alaska Sea Grant and opportunities to do things within that workforce development category through other funding mechanisms that actually are beyond the scope of our research project as well. So yeah, we're definitely interested in supporting the fishing industry within the state of Alaska. So reach out to us for more information.
Thank you.
Let's see, there's another question. Has Blue Evolution and or Green Wave participated in the Sea Grant program? Not sure what Green Wave is, but I do want to know what Blue Evolution is. A seaweed mariculture company that's trying to grow seaweed within the state of Alaska to produce it for food. And yes, I didn't talk about it, but there is a project that's a partnership, in fact, with Blue Evolution, and they have been funding, the graduate student funding actually has come from Blue Evolution. They've also funded a technician on the project. And then Sea Grant has provided other funding for the project. So there is a close partnership on that project having to do with kelp mariculture. And then, but let me clarify though that there are PI requirements outlined in our RFP, and we would want to see partnerships with companies, not companies themselves, submitting requests for funding. So there's a question here, how particular are the pre-proposal formatting requirements? And would it be possible to have the pre-proposal checked before submitting? Yes, we could submit it. The pre-proposal is pretty lax. I mean, the main requirement has to do with page, limits. So the pre-proposal is pretty low key. I don't think there really would be too many issues, but if you'd like to submit it in advance, that would be fine. The full proposal is a lot more complicated with many more parts. Many of these are specified by NOAA and National Sea Grant. And so at the full proposal stage, that's where it could become more important, definitely, to work with us to make sure each of the individual components are included. But yeah, so we would be happy to review a pre-proposal ahead of time, but the requirements are not too particular, I guess would be my answer to that. Other questions?
Ginny, is it possible to partner with Marine Advisory Program agents or not?
That's a great question, and actually become largely because I haven't focused on that issue. But yes, we would in fact encourage you to reach out to Alaska Sea Grant staff and Marine Advisory Program agents to discuss your project with them. And where there's a nice synergy there, we would definitely encourage you to involve them in your project. Unfortunately, the Marine Advisory Program, though, isn't everywhere around the state. And so we understand there are communities and there are focus areas that, where Alaska Sea Grant doesn't have people. So it's not a requirement of your project, but definitely feel free to reach out. And once again, if you need help trying to identify a person, let us know. I can definitely help connect you to the right people that might be able to help your project. And even if a person isn't, feel free to reach out to other people. For example, Sunny Rice is a Marine Advisory Program agent in Petersburg, and maybe, you're based in Anchorage, but you have an idea, feel free to reach out to Sunny and just bounce the idea off of her. She thinks very broadly statewide, and so particularly with regards to commercial fishing and commercial fishing partners. So feel free to reach out to people and explore ideas and opportunities. And yes, you can definitely include Marine Advisory Program faculty in your project.
Thank you.
Okay, so another question's come in. Can a small business or individual not affiliated with a research institution be a co-PI? And I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm going to, the answer is that the PI, there are requirements for who can be a PI. And I am going to pull up. Okay, so the PI must be affiliated with a university, 2- or 4-year college, museum, research laboratory, or other nonprofit or tribal research or education institution in Alaska. Co-PIs may be affiliated with any of the above institutions, research or education institutions from outside of Alaska, state or federal agencies, for-profit and foreign organizations. So basically, a large number of people are eligible to be co-PIs, and a subset of them are eligible to be PIs. So we encourage you so in answer to your question, a for-profit company can definitely be a co-PI. And if there are emerging industries where there could be this really nice connection to a research or education institution within Alaska, then we'd love to see that kind of partnership. Once again, and if you need help, you are a small business and you're looking for that kind of help, reach out to me. I'd be happy to help connect you, try to connect you with people that could help. Other questions? These have been great questions. You're an awesome audience. Okay, if there aren't, I'm not hearing any other questions or seeing any others on chat. I'd like to thank you for joining. On today's session, we'll post the slides as well as the recording of this webinar on our website. As I've mentioned a few times, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Sea Grant, the Sea Grant Director, Heather Brandon, or the Marine Advisory Program faculty that are distributed around the state. I hope everybody has a great day, and thanks for joining.